Hey, what's going on, boys? It's Stu. Silverwolf's banner only has about a week left, or actually only a few days at the time of this video recording, and after her is going to be Luocha's banner, so I'm here to answer a question you may or may not have. Should you roll for Luocha in Honkai Star Rail? Now, a couple disclaimers first. My last couple of Star Rail videos were guides on characters who were already part of the game. This one, however, is for a character who technically isn't in the game yet, at least, again, not at the time this video is out. As such, my analysis of Luocha and predictions for him and how viable he is may not be accurate when he does become available and people start using him to figure out just how good he actually is. Second of all the information that I'm referencing to talk about Luocha and his kit in this video is from a Google Doc that has leaked information for many upcoming characters in Star Rail, so the link is in the description if you want to check it out yourself. And third, make sure to check me out on Twitch. I stream Star Rail every day as one of my many gacha games I play on stream, so if you want to talk to me about anything Star Rail or just gacha related in general, come stop by and chill. twitch.tv/toastnumber98. Luocha is a 5-star imaginary character, our second one after Granddaddy Welt. Most importantly, he's Abundance, making him our third healer in the game. His skill is a single target heal that scales uniquely off his attack, not HP. In addition, it has two secondary effects. First, the skill produces 1 stack of Abyss Flower. This will come into play later when we talk about his talent. And second, after using this skill, when any of his teammates gets hit and their HP drops to or below half, Luocha will automatically, instantly use his skill on them again. This auto heal, let's call it that, does not use a skill point, but it can't be used again until after 2 turns. Note that this auto heal is considered identical to the original skill, which means that it should also generate another stack of Abyss Flower. Keep this in mind for when, again, we talk about Luocha's talent later on. His ultimate is actually an offensive ult that removes 1 buff from all enemies and does AoE imaginary damage to them that scales off his attack. It also gives him 1 stack of Abyss Flower when it's used too. Note that this ultimate should remove an enemy buff first before it does damage, because I believe that's how Pella's skill is also worded, and Pella's skill specifically removes a buff from her target before it deals damage too, with how her skill works against the robot enemies that have their own shields. Now, for his talent. When Luocha accumulates 2 Abyss Flower stacks, he uses them to create a sort of inverse healing field that lasts for 2 turns and resets his Abyss Flower count back down to 0. While this field is active, when any ally attacks an enemy, they heal themselves by a small amount that scales off of Luocha's attack. This field will immediately disappear early if Luocha himself dies in the middle of combat, so keep that in mind. For those of you who play Genshin, this is basically the same as Chi-Chi's Elemental Burst and how it heals her team, or for those of you who have Bailu in Star Rail already, it's the opposite of how her invigoration stacks work, where it heals your allies when they take hits from enemies. Lastly, for his kit, Luocha's technique makes it so that your team starts with this healing field from his talent immediately active at the start of your next battle. Moving on to his trace tree, his first bonus ability gives him access to a debuff clear, the same one as Natasha's, where it removes 1 debuff from whoever he uses his skill on. Note that this should also apply to Luocha's auto heal, so his debuff cleansing ability should be very strong. His second bonus ability makes it so that whenever the healing field from his talent is active, whenever an enemy is directly attacked by an ally, the rest of your team gets a little bit of healing too. His third bonus ability increases his chance to resist any crowd control debuff put on him by 70%. Crowd control, or CC for short, effects should be things like imprisonment, freeze, any debuff that prevents your character from acting, or in the case of Star Rail, anything that prevents them from using their ultimates out of turn. The bonus stats he gets from his trace tree are attack, defense, and HP. And finally, his eidolons. His E1 makes it so that his talent field also increases his team's attack by 20%, and recall that Luocha's healing scales off of his own attack, so it's both improving his healing and damage with his ultimate. His E2 makes it so that whenever Luocha uses his skill or his auto heal triggers, if the target ally's HP is lower than half, his outgoing healing specifically increases by 30%, but if their HP is at half or higher already, they instead get a shield that scales off of his attack. His E4 gives his his talent field another piece of utility by reducing all enemies' damage dealt while it's active by 12%, and his E6 does the same from his ultimate by giving it a 100% fixed chance to reduce all enemies' global elemental resist by 20% for 2 turns. First things first, Luocha is a must-pull for anyone who wants to push MOC ASAP but doesn't have a second healer yet, so in other words Bailu, or at the very least Gepard. Memories of Chaos enemies increase in level every floor all the way up to level 90 or so at MOC 10, so they're gonna beat that ass harder and harder the deeper you push into MOC. Friendly reminder that this is not Genshin, where you can just YOLO into Abyss 12 with no healers and try to iframe everything just to keep resetting for 3 hours straight because you have a skill issue. No, in Star Rail, because this game is turn-based, enemies are going to smack you in the face no matter how fast your characters are. This means at a certain point in MOC, you're practically forced to bring a healer, or at least the guy who smacks people in the face with a big-ass guitar case. So if you don't have either Bailu or Gepard yet, and you care about being able to clear MOC 10, or at least try to as soon as possible, then Luocha will be a must-pull for you. End of story. Now, for those of you who don't care about rushing MOC anytime soon, and you want to take your time with it, but you're still wondering if Luocha is still worth rolling, or if you already have Bailu as a second healer, the short answer is no. Not really. Simple reason is because there will be more abundance characters that'll come out in the future, and you can roll for those instead. If you look at the Google Doc that I have in the description about future Star Rail characters and scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we have more abundance characters coming out like Butler, Huohuo, and Lynx. So if you're okay with waiting for them instead, or you prefer cute waifus over some dude whose last name was literally Apocalypse in another game, then I think it's okay to skip Luocha now. To be fair though, we don't know when exactly we'll get those future abundance characters, and it certainly won't be anytime soon, since we already know who's slated to come out all the way through 1.3, and that may be enough time for people to change their minds about MOC, or for MiHoYo to throw an event at us that requires 2 teams, just like MOC, though the chances of that happening are extremely low. So what about Luocha as a character? How good will he be exactly, or in other words, is he good enough to roll for even if you don't have an immediate need for him, or just for future proofing? My biggest concern to start with this kit is that because he has an offensive ult, he does not have access to a burst heal. Both Natasha and Bailu, because their ultimates are heals, have what I call burst heals. That is, their ultimates heal for a ton, or at least they should. Not only that, but since you can use ultimates in Star Rail at any time as long as the characters themselves aren't CC'd, they're instant heals at the click of a button, and your lifelines for whenever your team takes a huge AoE hit from like a boss enemy or anything that puts your characters in the red. And recall for a moment that MOC enemies hit harder and harder the higher floor you go, so your healing output needs to keep up, and having those burst heals from Natasha and Bailu contributes greatly to that. Because Luocha doesn't have a burst heal, and his kit is designed to give incremental heals more frequently to make up for it, he will naturally be less equipped to deal with higher MOC floors that start throwing 2 elite or even boss enemies at you at the same time. So unless it turns out that Luocha's combined healing from his talent field, his skill, and auto heal are actually good enough, or his utility of a damage dealing ult and debuff removal are able to make up for his loss in overall healing, I'm not sure if he's going to be as good of an actual healer as Natasha and Bailu are. I'm able to throw 2 full teams of level 80 characters, all with plus 15 relics, into MOC, but the last few floors have enemies that still really grind them down. So if my Bailu and Natasha don't have good enough sustain, I do have some doubt if Luocha does either, particularly when this MOC rotates and doesn't have as many imaginary enemies as it does now. Also, because of his incremental heals, Luocha's kit relies on his teammates not getting blasted in the face and losing like 90% of the health from one move, so that way all of his heals have time to take effect over the course of a fight, which is why not having a burst heal is gonna hurt. So if your team is under-leveled and or under-geared, and you throw them into high-level MOC, even with Luocha, they're just not going to last very long unless they also have a shielder with them. And at that point, since you're bringing both a shielder and a healer, that's a whole lot of potential DPS that you're missing from that team, so, good luck 3-starring that floor unless you somehow already have insane crit gear for Luocha waiting for him on your account. If your teams right now aren't in great shape, then what are the chances that you'll be able to get Luocha himself leveled and geared anytime soon, right? Now that I've shit on Luocha for a bit, let's turn it around and talk about its good stuff. He's imaginary, and in fact he and Yukong on the same banner are going to be many players' first imaginary characters, and he has an AoE ult, so you can make that one healer meme with him and have him double as both your healer and imaginary DPS. Thank God he scales with attack, right? This means that if he's built with crit stats, Luocha becomes a very efficient member of your team, as in he can both heal and contribute significantly to your team's overall damage output, unlike what Natasha or Bailu does right now. Since you can only have 4 characters in a team, every member has to pull their weight in terms of contributing to the team's overall effectiveness, and since Star Rail is still a very recent gacha, most characters we have in the game are pretty one-dimensional in their capabilities, making each character slot all the more precious. So the fact that Luocha can potentially cover 2 roles at the same time makes him a very attractive option to put into an MOC team, on paper at least, and if nothing else, he'll still be able to help a lot with breaking enemies with imaginary weakness thanks to his AoE ult. Luocha also enjoys having all 3 of his bonus abilities from his trace tree be very important, but the ones that stand out are his debuff cleanse and his 70% CC resist. I know I'm repeating this for like the 3rd or 4th time or something, but his auto heals are tagged as identical to his original skill, so they can all remove 1 debuff each once his first bonus ability is unlocked. This should mean that Luocha's debuff removal is the best in the game, and the more debuff cleanses we have in the game, the better. It's especially good when you consider that a lot of big attacks from elite or boss enemies also put some kind of debuff on your characters when they hit, so if they hit your characters down below half HP, then Luocha's auto heal can not only heal them, but also deal with a debuff at the same time without Luocha needing to use his skill on them manually on his next turn like you would with Natasha. And speaking of dealing with debuffs, his 3rd bonus ability is actually insane, because the biggest enemy of healers and support type characters in Star Rail is anything that CCs them, since not being able to pop their ults whenever you need them is a big deal. Regular debuffs and DOTs are fine, they can deal with that, but it's specifically CC debuffs like Imprison, Freeze, or Kafka's Domination that they gotta watch out for. So the fact that Luocha gets 70% increased resist against CC debuffs specifically is amazing, and you get to even make him completely immune to them if you get enough effect resist stats on him too, through his relics of course. Not everyone can be, OK code and have a 100% effect res Natasha, but admittedly, you can get pretty close with Luocha and his 3rd bonus ability. And to put everything into perspective, this current MOC cycle, especially MOC 9 and MOC 10, have sides that are pretty much built for Luocha. MOC 9 has one side that throws 2 disciples at you, and they can spawn 2 more of those resurrection guys as one of their moves, but since it's a buff, Luocha can strip it from them with his ult, making them much easier to deal with. MOC 10 has you fighting against the annoying-ass sanction robots in the first half and Kafka in the second. Luocha is a solid pick for both. The first side because the sanction robots' big imprison attack does a ton of damage, but if it's that attack that drops one of your characters' HP down below half, then Luocha's auto heal can immediately get rid of the imprison if it's active, on top of healing your character back up. More important, however, is Kafka and her mind control, which is a potential run killer all on its own, since if she dominates your healer, well, that's most likely the end of the run, since, well, simulated universe buffs won't save your ass here. But if you have both Luocha and Bronya, you can run them together against Kafka, so that way, even if, for example, Luocha gets dominated, Bronya can still bail him out, and vice versa. Even if you don't have Bronya, at the very least, you can have both teams in MOC 10 run a debuff cleanser. Oh, and, Kafka's weak to imaginary too, so that kind of helps a lot. Finally, for those of you who are interested in rolling for multiple copies of him but are curious to know if they're worth it, Luocha's eidolons are in fact hilariously strong, not because they let him do what he already does better, which is the case with most characters in Star Rail, I would say, but instead they diversify his capabilities and let him do even more things. His E1 is an attack buff, so that means he's a Harmony character now. His E2 lets him give shields to his teammates, potentially, so now that means he's Preservation, and his E4 and E6 are both AoE debuffs, so now that means he's Nihility. Or another way to put it is, if you have an E6 Luocha, he's basically an Abundance, Harmony, Preservation, and Nihility character all in one. So, the next time you see an all-in-one printer or scanner or even one of those mega drink machines at a fast food place, think of Luocha. This is also a minor reason why I don't think E0 Luocha is a high priority pull, because a lot of this potential is locked behind eidolons. But in case money isn't a concern for you, or you have a thing for, tall, long, blonde-haired men straight out of a Bishonen manga or anime, then Luocha's eidolons are great because they emphasize the whole multi-role healer thing that he already has going on as a healer who scales with attack and has a damage-dealing AoE ultimate. Sorry, I lied. There's one more thing that I forgot to mention, and since I don't know where else I would have talked about this, here it is. If you're interested in rolling Blade in 3 weeks after Luocha, since we pretty much already know that Blade is first half of 1.2, these two have a particular synergy that makes Luocha, at least on paper, a better healer for Blade specifically than the others. Blade has a Berserker playstyle where he sacrifices HP to use his skill, so basically like Arlen's skill that we already have in the game, and his first bonus ability increases his healing received by 20% if he has half HP or lower. So that means if Blade uses his skill and it drops his health down below half, this should also trigger Luocha's auto heal, assuming that it's not already on cooldown, that is, since its requirement is any ally whose HP drops to 50% or lower at any point. Note that Bailu's invigoration stacks can't heal Blade when he uses his skill because it specifically only heals allies when they get hit, and that Berserker playstyles like this are especially dangerous in Star Rail because of how hard enemies hit, especially in the upper half of MOC. So Luocha's kit, while it's missing a burst heal that Blade would definitely appreciate, should otherwise synergize pretty well with him. So, in summary, Luocha is to be a multi-role healer who sacrifices access to a burst heal for a DPS ult instead, and relies more on incremental heals to keep his team topped off and free of debuffs. But in turn, this means that he's more effective in teams that are already leveled and geared, and he himself needs to be quite leveled and geared too, unlike other healers who can get away with having suboptimal gear to a certain extent, because they have burst heals. But the fact that he's imaginary alone is something to consider because many players don't even have any imaginary characters at all yet, unless you're, waiting for that free copy of Yukong in 1.2 at some point. Again, please keep in mind that this is just a preliminary assessment of him, and that I reserve the right to change my mind on him when he does come out and we see how well he performs, but for now, should you roll for Luocha? To me, the answer is yes, if you qualify for any of these three reasons. First, if you need that second healer for MOC. Second, if Blade is your husbando and you want to make sure he stays healthy in battle. Or third, you feel like future Abundance characters may take too long to come out and you feel like it's better to get Luocha now and have him for when you need him as opposed to a month or two from now and trying MOC and then wishing you had him. But if none of these reasons apply to you, then no, you can skip him. Because most of you, I'm sure, are saving for Kafka, aren't you? I know who you are. If you found the video informative or useful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future Star Rail videos. Make sure to check me out over at my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ToaSniper98. I usually stream Star Rail every day, so stop by if you have any further questions about Luocha, or Star Rail, or just gachas in general, since in case you haven't noticed by now, I'm a bit of a gacha master myself. My next video is Should You Roll for Yukong, and hopefully I'll get that out soon after this one. And I know I still owe you guys a Selly guide video as well from the Bronya guide. I just wanted to get these two videos out first since I gotta chase that YouTube content game a little harder. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon. Peace!